Women podcast. For your career and your life, no matter what business you're in.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Northern Power Women podcast. I'm Sam Walker at boiling point here in Arizona as we head into another massive heat wave. And Simone Roche at boiling point in Liverpool. Well, for completely different reasons, really. We're all at boiling point this week. What's going on?
Oh, well, it is, considering we always record this at the same time every week. We're 15 minutes after our start point of started to recording because we've just had the mother of all rants. And I still say, Sam, 1 week we're going to put that pre-chat, which is normally a few minutes, yada, yada, yada. No, this was a proper full-on. I think people need to hear that, although maybe it might need a slight bit of editing.
Needs probably the beat machine to come out. I mean, yeah, I was just sharing the fact that for some reason this week, and funnily enough, my podcast, Desert Diaries, which I release every week, was called Reaching Boiling Point, because I really feel, not even the temperature, obviously, because even, you have had hot weather in England. I think here in the States with the children going back to school, in the UK with A-level and now GCSE results coming out and causing all sorts of headaches for so many people. And just the relentlessness of when is this going to end? Because I am in a complete, still semi-lockdown, cabin fever situation where, as a woman especially, and I was listening to a really interesting report on NPR here yesterday in the States about the fact that women have been so far adversely affected than men in lockdown, mainly because we take on so many of the caring responsibilities, which have been so challenging, that I'm ready. I'm losing my mind. I really, really am. And everyone running a business, everyone just still texts you and emails you at the weekend because there doesn't seem to be any boundary from working hours anymore.
Yeah, there's no, and it's everything, isn't it? I found something today and I was looking through and I'm like, oh my goodness, I should have followed up with that on a Twitter DM. And then it's a Facebook message and then it's WhatsApp. How many WhatsApp groups are we in? And don't get me wrong, I've started quite a few of them. We entered into this one and there is a real passion, isn't there, to keep sense checked on people and to keep people connected. It's critically important. It's massively important to not just Northern Power Women. It's to us, isn't it? It's part of our DNA. It's what we do, and it's what makes us who we are. But I had a catch up earlier this week with a wonderful woman, Nicole Zuber. She works for Kellogg's, and she's from Minnesota. I was just going to verge into a Minnesota accent, then I realised I didn't really know what that was. But anyway, and I've now in the office come to writing these great sound bites that I get from these brilliant conversations I'm having, and it was. We talked about this Corona coaster, which we've adopted, and lots of people have adopted that phrase. And I think I've said just prior to this, thank goodness we're not all at the same point, if you like. Thank God we're not all reaching boiling point together, because goodness, that would absolutely be like a volcano erupting. But we talked about self-care. We talked about self-care and how important it was. And she says, the thing is, I think we've forgotten how to look after ourselves like we would a friend. So when we hear ourselves being so anxious, stressed, frustrated over it, whatever it is, if that was a friend, we're like, well, right, okay, what can we do? How can we do something differently about this? Or actually, here's just a full-on hug, even if it's a virtual hug or an inappropriate meme or something. But we're not doing that for ourselves. So we need to look at ourselves and we need to look after ourselves like we would a friend. And because you know what, if we don't look after ourselves, then who else is going to look after as much as we can ourselves? So I think that was a key thing. And I probably misquoted Nicole slightly, but there was something in that. I was like, oh my goodness, it puts you back again, doesn't it? And you go, right, I need to press pause. Although we haven't, but we've got to fight. We've got to do something, because whether we like it or not, there's no end in sight for this at the moment.
No, and we did talk a lot last week, didn't we, about taking time out and a bit of self-care, and I took myself away for a night, which, and I did come back feeling incredible and refreshed, and that lasted approximately 6 hours, genuinely, until the next working day started and the kids being back at school here and Zoom meetings, links not working. I'm an 8-year-old having a meltdown because she can't connect to her teacher and not being able to find the work on the Google Classroom. And I do have huge sympathy and empathy with the teachers who are also fighting fires apologise on their end. But it's just the stress is unrelenting. It really, really is. And it occurred to me, and we were discussing this, I haven't had a holiday this year. And I think most of us feel that way. I had one night away from my family in a hotel. The only time I've actually had off work was 2 days when we were fleeing the house after we were threatened by our old landlord and literally fled under police presence. I don't think that counts as a holiday. I'm just going to put it out there. So
I'm not sure. I'm absolutely not sure that. And I think this is the other thing, isn't it? And again, another phrase that came this week was, or today actually, was, who's checking on the checkers? Who's checking it? Who's doing that? And it's the same. We haven't had, a day off this year at all. We camped last weekend in a trailer tent in my brother's garden with my nieces and sister-in-law, and it was wonderful. But we've still got my laptop on, and we're still, you're just never off because the phone calls, not the phone calls so much, but the messages are still coming through. And I suppose that's our choice. We could turn our phones off and we could do this, but it's a bit more challenging when you work for yourself, I think.
It is, because you don't generally have that person to kind of filter any of those messages for you. And I also appreciate that lots of people who get in touch with me for work would think, well, you don't have to reply. I don't expect you to reply. Just because I'm working at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night doesn't mean I expect you to reply. But again, it's there and you've seen it. And once you've seen it, your brain starts to kind of whir into action, doesn't it? So I don't know whether it is time to start redrawing some boundaries. But a lot of people would say, well, that works for me because I am homeschooling or caring for somebody, my working time is those hours. I think it's difficult, but we've talked about this 1,000 times that we are in uncharted territory and we are muddling our way through to a new way of working, and we're going to have these peaks and troughs on the Corona coaster, and at the moment I'm in a trough. But I'm aware we will work our way through this mire, but man alive, it is hard. It is so hard.
Yeah, it is hard, and it is that unknown. And I think, more than ever, it is about, like, of just checking on the checkers, checking in, even if it's a WhatsApp message that you get that you think, oh, another WhatsApp message, you kind of want to caveat, you almost need a different alert for it, going, this is a check-in, this is a check-in WhatsApp. It's all good. I think there's a challenge, isn't there? Talk about sending emails and messages at different times of day, and you can't unsee it once it's landed in your box. But I remember having to do this many years ago, when I had to manage up with a manager because she'd be working sort of weekends and sending emails at 2 a.m. in the morning after an event or whatever it may have been. And I remember having to say, actually, I know you're just trying to clear your desk and whatever, but it's actually written in a quite short manner because you're trying to get out the door. Not that I'm necessarily seeing it at this time, but it's almost quite ambiguous as emails can be. And what we negotiated, I suppose, or what we later with is she would schedule, because you can schedule an email, can't you, to say, and that's great. And I think that's a really good, because I did something last night where I sent something into the, sort of our Teams chat, and I thought, oh gosh, this is late. And then I kind of, please don't respond to it now, you don't need to do that. So then you sent 2 messages that have pinged or alerted, kind of going, look at this, but don't look at it yet. So it's you haven't got that time delay on the other mechanisms, have you? So I think, what, it all starts with us, doesn't it? We have to, we kind of have to, like you say, maybe draw some boundaries and, look after ourselves a bit better. And I do feel like we're saying it every week, but I am sending you a colossal glowy hug from sunny Liverpool on this very recording day.
Oh, thank you. And breathe. I want to talk about some good news. Let's talk about good news. And I know you've seen this. The wonderful Maggie O'Carroll from the Women's Org. They're going to partner.
Not Maggie O'Farrell. Maggie
O'Farrell, as I always call her. Do you know what? They're both awesome. Maggie, I'll call her that. From the Women's Org. This is brilliant, and I love the fact that they've been chosen to partner with the Enterprise Research Centre. They're looking at how social enterprises can play a really critical role in the recovery of the UK from the COVID-19 crisis. And what's amazing about social enterprises, of course, they quite often work with disadvantaged communities, and it's going to be launched really quickly, which shows that there are women at the helm. We don't muck about. Autumn 2020, it's going to have a look. And really looking at the individual themes in relation to social enterprise like employment and skills opportunities and diversity and inclusion and environmental sustainability. And I just think this is absolutely terrific. I mean, Maggie has talked about the fact that the social economy has just for so long been a stalwart in providing opportunities for these disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. And guess what? Yet again, they are the demographic that's been hardest hit by the impact of COVID-19. So it's going to, it's groundbreaking research straight out of Liverpool, highlighting the key role that these social enterprises can play in really rebuilding the economy in a financially sustainable way, while supporting those communities that need it the most. So I just want to give a huge high five to Maggie and everyone at the Women's Org, because just brilliant stuff. And it gives me hope that with projects like this going, there is going to be this lovely attention to detail for the people who really need it most.
And equally, this is the advantage to do this research has taken place over this COVID period. So you think this is where we have to find our positives, don't we? We think, would this have happened if this period wasn't happening? No. So actually, is this a great time to pull off those layers and look and really see? And so I think this is a perfect example of a brilliant leadership, brilliant organisation, collaborating for real good, and also to make change, not just to create a talking shop or to create another sort of raft of research, but about doing good. Well done, Maggie OC.
Well done to you, our Maggie. And another bit of good news. Well, it's good news, and then, the backlash has just been, completely predictably depressing. Kamala Harris, now, of course, officially the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party in the forthcoming American election. First woman of colour to go on that ticket. First black woman, a woman of black descent, but also of South Asian heritage she has as well. I've been hugely inspired by what she's been saying. Of course, President Trump has immediately come out and called her nasty. Where have we heard that word before? Whenever he just rolls that out in terms of female politicians. And there has just been huge backlash. I mean, really predictable misogynistic and racist backlash against her from certain members of society here in the US. And, it's 100 years. In fact, it was 100 years last week, 18th of August, that some women have had suffrage here in the US. They were a little bit behind the UK. But again, it was just white women, and they were still women of colour, Hispanic women, Native American women who did not have that vote for some time. As in the UK, of course, the suffragettes we know didn't manage to secure those votes for every woman. But, that kind of misogynistic backlash that I've seen sometimes brings us back down to earth. That yes, there are still these great strides being made, and yet these anti-female voices are still very much out there, this kind of vocal minority. And I know that Eleanor, the wonderful Eleanor from Northern Power Women, a very young woman, was talking this week, wasn't she? Or last week, rather, on BBC Radio Merseyside about kind of sexist and misogynistic behaviour that she's experienced.
Absolutely. It was just, again, Maggie O'Carroll. I feel like this is the new Maggie O'Carroll podcast, but she'd sent a note to say, introducing me and to say, listen, Radio Merseyside want to talk about catcalling. They want to call about wolf whistling and catcalling. There's a report out that girls as young as 12 have reported allegations of sexual harassment. And there's an organisation called the Anti-Harassment Club that is getting has had 100 reports on its website just since June about, sort of just awful behaviour. And it was weird. This came in, and not only 2 days before, Eleanor had come into the office to Northern Power Man and I and said, never guess what happened last night. I was walking through town and a man crossed over the street and just went, "Nice legs, love." And it was like he went out of his way. He goes, it was just like creepy. She was like, he was in his 60s. He probably wasn't. He's probably in his 40s. She's so young. But he came, and she said, it was just, no, absolutely not. So when this came in, asking, Maggie referring it to me, saying, would you like to speak on this, I said to Alan, I said, you know what, would you, this has happened to you, and this happens to you, and continues to happen. Would you like to speak on it? You know, not been in the media, 19 years old. I love the fact that, you know, we launched the Be Heard campaign, didn't we?
Yes.
Where we've been encouraging everyone to share their stories and sort of let's flood the waves with more balanced conversations and stories. And I love the fact that she just went, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm nervous. But do you remember the other week you talked about, on this very podcast, we talked about that whole, it's not nerves, it's excitement.
Yeah.
And do you know what? She's so full of, I've had the messages off her auntie, off her mum, you know, to say that was such a brilliant, but she was fantastic. And it was brilliant because it's so easy to go down a path on this. You know, shouldn't you be flattered? Shouldn't you be this? And, you know, what can you do?
And
it happens to men too.
There are women
know.
who, you know, I have hosted this debate 1,000 times on radio in my years, but you always get a large amount of women coming in going, oh, you should be so lucky, you should be flattered. Yeah. I'm 50, whatever, I don't get that anymore. I wish I did. And I think, do you know what? There's a certain type of insecurity that has led us to believe that unwarranted attention is somehow desirable. And, you know, it goes back to the same conversation, cheer up, love, it'll never happen. Oh, you'd be so pretty if you smiled. Get stuffed. You know, I don't care if you find me attractive or not. Random man on the street, you're all right. It's just disconcerting.
And it was brilliant because when she was talking to the presenter on the show, you know, she said, well, actually, it's really important that, you know, Northern Power Women as a community, we are full of, like, we've got great male advocates,
100%.
You know, and actually it's a responsibility there to call it out no matter what it is. And it was like, you've got male advocates as part of Northern Power Women. Like, absolutely, that we built on the foundations of being for all genders. You know, it was massively important to do that. So, you know what? I think it's frustrating that we're having this conversation in 2020. But actually, we put a Twitter poll out as well, and it really deviated between, we asked the question, you know, can we believe this is still happening? And has this happened to you? And there's definitely a generational split on it, whereby, you know, it's not necessarily happening to me, and don't want it to. Thank you very much. Hashtag. But there's definitely a younger voice. But actually, somebody else went, you know what? If it has happened to me, I now find it patronising. But equally, and in fact, actually, Rob was on a call with an organisation this morning. On the morning that we were doing this, and said, actually, relaying this story, and went, I was running last night and a car slowed down. And it was that unnerving of the car slowing down to kind of one man in a car on his own, winding the window down and like shouting something out of the window. It freaked out because you do not know. You do not know now what is going to come out of that window. Is it a voice? Is it a weapon? Is it something else? You don't know. So, you know.
Again, it just beggars belief where people find a single person on their own finds the confidence to do this. Where have they learnt this behaviour to slow down and catcall a young woman on her own? I just, I find it astounding. We need some positivity going on, our Simone. Should we get some life lessons in our life?
Do you know, and I couldn't think of anyone better and more topical, actually. Yeah. Zoe Hingston. She's a police inspector, positive action over in our fantastic Northumbria police force over in the northeast. And I am going to caveat, Zoe herself had masses of imposter syndrome about pulling these life lessons together. And do you know what? I do not know why, because she is absolutely amazing. Listen to Zoe.
My name is Zoe Hingston and I am a police officer. When have you faced imposter syndrome and what did you do about it? So this is something that I wasn't actually aware of in the beginning of my career, and it's only of late that I've come to understand that feeling and that I'd seen it in myself. And the example that I would give would probably be, and the most recent one for me, was where I was asked to speak at a conference. So I had gone along and I'd seen my picture in the brochure that had been set out of all the speakers and a little bit of a blurb about me. And I read it and I panicked and I thought, oh my goodness, I've been put up here as an expert, a subject matter expert. What if I get up there and people think you really have no idea what you're talking about? Do I actually know what I'm talking about? And all these emotions were going through my head and I just started to panic. So whilst I was waiting for me to be called to the podium to speak, the way that I coped with it was actually looking at my notes and thinking, right, what am I actually going to be talking about? What am I actually here to do? And when I started reading through the notes that I had in front of me, I realised actually this is something I know really well. This is something that I'm passionate about, that I was talking about. This is something that I was talking about lived experience. And the way that I got round it was just to allow myself to have some self-belief in the fact that what I was going to be doing was standing up, was talking about something that I really believed in and something that I did understand because I'd lived through the experiences I was talking about. So that for me is how I dealt with imposter syndrome and that feeling right at that moment. What advice would you pass on to someone starting their career today? So my advice would be that this is just the beginning. Don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed into what perhaps you start out being. There's always new experiences and new things to learn. And when you go through your career and opportunities present themselves to you, take them because you just don't know where your career may end up. I started out myself thinking that I wanted to be a solicitor, and now I'm actually a police officer and have happily been so for 15 years. And that's something that I never in a million years could have thought that would be the path that I took. So what I would say is be brave. It's just the beginning and seize every moment. What's one piece of advice that has stuck with you? So for me, that would be to speak up. Speak up and basically have your say. It can be really hard sometimes in professional situations where you're not sure whether you can give your opinion or if there's large amounts of people in a meeting and you don't want to just be seen to be speaking for the sake of it. But I would say speak up and say it, because your opinions and your thoughts are just as valid as everybody else's. By speaking up, you might find that and expressing that opinion changes the course of the conversation or actually takes people in a different direction that they hadn't even considered before, which could be for the benefit of a project or even a conversation or some learning that you could be part of at that moment in time. So yeah, definitely speak up and don't be afraid to do so. What would you tell the 25-year-old about work-life balance? So my advice would be to find what works for you, and not to look at other people and compare yourself and think, well, they do that, so maybe I should be doing that. Definitely finding what helps you to de-stress, which then makes you healthier when you are in the workplace and able to cope with things that you may have to overcome, because it's so important on your mental health to look at that side of things and what you can do to almost safeguard yourself. In terms of work, I would say set yourself boundaries. You could probably fill the majority of your time. There'll always be little jobs that you should be doing, but make sure that you are keeping your work and personal life separately. So when you're out of the office, if you don't need to be checking those emails, then don't. I would say managing your time. So prioritize the tasks and events that are the most important or time sensitive, and focus on the essentials first, and think about how that will impact on you. And by taking breaks and taking time off and investing in your own personal development, all of these things will help you to be more productive in the workplace. But that is intrinsically linked to what you do outside of work. And that goes back to what I said at the beginning about making sure you find what helps you outside of work in order to relax and recharge.
The wonderful Zoe Hingston. I love that. And what a brilliant, brilliant lesson for us all. If you're feeling that imposter syndrome, because guess what? We all do it. Breaking news. That person you really admire, they feel it as well. So whenever we feel it, sit down, make a note, make a list of all your achievements. And then when you look at it in black and white like she did, you go, hang on. I am good. I do rock. I do know my stuff. So thank you, Zoe. It's something I actually used yesterday when I had to do a proposal for a client. And guess what? It totally worked. So thank you so much, Zoe, for that. We'd love your life lessons. Get in touch, please. Just tell us you're interested and we do the rest, don't we, Simone?
Absolutely. Podcast at northernpowerwomen.com. We want to hear your top tips about your life lessons. Thank you so much.
Bit of a fun story for us to end with, actually.
Oh, we need it. We need it this week, Sam.
Well, it's fun/interesting. And when you think about it, of course, it makes total sense. Guess what women aren't buying very much of anymore?
Oh,
we're not buying much of it. Well, in fact, there has been a huge rise in leisure wear for women. And we all know why. The Zoom call of dreams where, waist down, you're wearing sweatpants. Well, it's kind of similar along those lines, especially as we've started to come out of lockdown and back into the shops and back onto public transport. Women aren't buying lipstick because there's no point because we've got a mask on.
And actually, the whole the mask and lipstick. Someone the other week, one of our great advocates, she posted this brilliant picture. She's got her mask on, and afterwards she went, absolutely no lip gloss with your mask because I ended up putting it on upside down, and now I've got an upside down lipstick mark over my lip gloss. I'm like, so that's why no lipstick.
100%. And all those clever makeup tutorial influencers on YouTube who have zillions of subscribers, they are all launching videos now of how to make your eyes pop whilst wearing a mask. I've got washing to do. I haven't got time for that. But, good on you if you do.
Goodness. Oh, my goodness. And also, do you know what? Like you say, Zoom calls, leisure wears, just a very quick one. Fell over on a Zoom call this week, just saying, always about making a first impression, totally slipped down a step. Call was being recorded. It's going to be out there somewhere. But how do you fall over on a Zoom call? Not sure.
How do you fall over on a Zoom call?
I slipped down a step. I dropped my phone. It cut off. I dialed back in. I took a breath. I've got blood all over my leg, arms, whatever. It was a first time meeting with somebody. And I was like, oh, hello. She goes, are you all right? And I went, I just fell over. She goes, I thought you did. I just had no idea what happened. So yeah, thank goodness. If only I'd have had lipstick on.
Remind me next week to tell you what happened to me when I was recording a podcast with a very important client that involved them nearly having to dial 911. I will say no more than that right now. Make sure you're listening next week because I still get hot flush when I think about it. Thank you so much for listening this week. As ever, do please let us know any stories you have of your work or your life, any questions you have to ask, or of course your life lessons, podcast at northernpowerwomen.com. The next episode is coming your way on Monday, August the 31st. Good grief. Until then, this is the Northern Power Women podcast. I'm Sam Walker, and this is a What Goes On Media production.